program.
Thanks very much for having me. Thanks, Don.
Right, well, that's your book. Why would anyone want the Springbok job, given what you've written there?
Well, I don't think anybody would actually if they read the book properly, from cover to cover. You actually, I saw when you introed me, you said that it was one of the toughest jobs in South African sport. I think I beg to differ there. I think that it is the toughest job. I can't imagine a more tough job. I mean, it's just like the pressures that come to bear on a Springbok coach. Given South African rugby's place in the history of this country as well, and you know what it meant to so many people, both sides of the spectrum, before isolation and now subsequent to isolation, the pressures that are brought to bear on the coach to bring through the new South Africa, whilst at the same time placating so many different people and so many different interest groups. It's an impossible job. It really is a very difficult job.
It sounds like an untenable position. Has there anyone up until now who has got a little bit of the job right, or walked a fine line, but in the right direction?
Well, I think that a lot of them have got it right in patches. I think that there were quite a few coaches who started off well and then maybe ended badly. I think that Nick Mallett probably had the most potential. Right. I think that he could really have flown had he not gone a little bit wobbly in his third year, which is actually what happens. It tends to be the third year. In 1999 in the World Cup, he lost it a bit. I think he started to doubt some of the players who'd played for him before. Gary Teichmann obviously being the obvious one, but there were others as well. And he started to, well, the third year cycle is a very real thing. So I think he realised that there might be some players who had shot their bolt, if you like. So, but before that, Nick was outstanding. Was an outstanding coach.
He was almost on a record with us, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. They went 17 games without defeat, and if they'd got the 18th, then they would hold the record, which the All Blacks have tried to do a couple of times subsequently. I think they've equalled it once, but they still haven't managed to claim it as their own. So I think that Nick Mallett is an example of a very good coach. I think that Jake White was a very good coach initially. Then he also went through his wobbly patches. I mean, that's the problem. They all go through their wobbly patches. Jake was very good. He was very sure of himself in the beginning. I'm not sure. South Africa at the moment is clamouring for a new kind of game. I'm not sure if Jake on his own would have been able to bring that through, but certainly he was good enough to win South Africa Tri-Nations in his first year in charge, and he took them from nowhere as well. I mean, Red Australia had been in charge before, and I think we'd been sort of down at 6th in the world, and then the following year we won. Well, South Africa won the Tri-Nations. So Jake was good. Kitch Christie obviously won a World Cup and he never lost a game, but I'm not sure if his methods would have been sustainable had he carried on coaching in the year. He never. The thing about Kitch is that he never played against the All Blacks twice. He never coached against the All Blacks overseas. He never coached against Australia overseas. So it's quite difficult to really rate him. But obviously he won a World Cup, so he was the right man at the right time. And I think Ian McIntosh had a raw deal as a coach.
And that was quite early on, just post isolation.
Just post isolation. He was ahead of his time. He was the guy, I would say, who was ahead of his time. But I don't think South African rugby was ready for it, and nobody understood his game at the time. Subsequent to that, I think the rest of the world is playing the type of rugby that Ian McIntosh was coaching in 1993.
Do you think South African rugby appreciates an innovative coach, or is there far more at play?
I think South African rugby wants to win. I think that's the bottom line, is that they want to win, and a guy like Harry Viljoen actually had a lot of potential too. You may recall that when Harry Viljoen came in, he gave the players a ball to carry around with. In the very first game that he was in charge was in Argentina. I was there in Buenos Aires. They were told they weren't allowed to kick, and it took them until the 73rd minute to kick. He was quite innovative in his own way in bringing in overseas coaches, but South Africa wasn't ready. I mean, the South African media gave him a heck of a hard time for bringing in overseas coaches, and some of those guys like Michael Byrne and Les Kiss have gone on and actually done very well in other international managements. So he was he was quite perceptive, and I think in the end Harry just got fed up with all the criticism, got fed up with all the negativity. Nobody wanted to listen to what he was doing. He wanted to be innovative, and he suddenly realized, like they all do, that winning is the bottom line. He had these great grandiose plans when he came in, but winning is the bottom line, and sometimes that forces you to go back to being quite conservative, which I think is going to happen to the current coach.
You say winning is the most important thing in South African rugby, but have they ever really put a plan in place, a solid foundation like New Zealand does? and stuck to it. Is there any examples?
Emphatically not, and that's actually been the problem. I mean, Carl du Plessis was probably the most revolutionary coach to come in, and he came in preaching a completely new game. I mean, Carl was on a different planet to all the other coaches in South Africa at that time, and a very clever guy, unfortunately not maybe able to relate, to put his views across. So he wasn't a great teacher of the game.
Right.
But Carl came in, and basically he lasted, I think it was 7 tests, and then he was on his way. And my argument there was, if you're going to appoint a guy like Carl du Plessis, surely you've listened to his philosophy and you understand what he wants to put across. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. I interviewed Carl, obviously, for the book, and he said nobody ever spoke to him about philosophy. So they put him in charge of the team, and there was never any talk of philosophy, but he had radically different ideas, and it didn't produce initially. My point being, I don't think that Carl would have been a successful coach.
Yeah.
But if you're going to choose a guy like that, you need to give him time. If you're going to radically reinvent the wheel, you need to give that guy time to do it. And that is actually the problem. I don't think that any coach will be given the time to make the massive changes that might be needed for the South African game.
It seems like we kind of repeat patterns, and Heyneke Meyer kind of followed in that. You talk about the third year wobble, but he really did kind of go to pieces towards the end. How much pressure was he under?
Heyneke put himself under pressure as well.
It seemed like it was self-inflicted.
That was the thing with Heyneke, was that he really did. I mean, if you went to some of his last press conferences in London, he felt the pain of South Africa. He felt, he'd let the country down.
He was rambling a lot.
Yeah, he was rambling a lot in the end, and it comes through in the book.
Yeah.
In fact, I think I start the book with one of his press conferences. I felt sympathy for him, because he was a very decent man, Heyneke Meyer. But in the end, when I think the pressure got to him, he just didn't really know how to handle it. And I remember after they lost to Japan, that was when he really started to go off the rails a bit. And I arrived in Birmingham a little bit late because I'd suffered a family bereavement. And Heyneke, when I first saw Heyneke, he came across and said, "I'm really sorry that you're over here at a time like this." And I thought he was talking about my family bereavement, but he wasn't. He was talking about the Japanese defeat, and he really wore that disappointment, the pain of that defeat on his sleeve.
Yeah.
And then he started going on to me about how the players had let him down because they didn't listen to him and all that. And it's not really what the Springbok coach should do. And I remember thinking at the time that he's getting what I call mad coach's disease, and that it's not going to be long before everything unravels, and that he might end up leaving. And in the end, the Boks didn't do too badly. I mean, they made it to the World Cup semi-final.
Almost beat New Zealand.
They were close. On the scoreboard, they were close. I'm not so sure they were close in reality. I think New Zealand had that game well and under control the whole 80 minutes. But he came close, and the Springboks finished third out of 20 teams. So Heyneke could go away and feel that he let the country down. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of opinion. Rugby's not an empirical science. A lot of it's very subjective. There will still be people who will feel that Heyneke was on the right track, and that maybe that kind of rugby that he wanted to play was the way to go. I think that the type of rugby the Springboks played in 2013, which was Heineke's best year, I think that was the way to go. Unfortunately, the following year when they lost to Ireland in Dublin, and then they lost to Wales on that interview tour, I think that was a slippery slope after that.
Gavin Rich, thank you so much for joining us. That's your book, The Springbok Coaches, a must-read for all South African rugby fanatics. Right, that's where we're going to have to leave it for tonight. Thank you for joining us here on Sport on Prime Time. Remember